Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and we are excited. I'm always excited. Every time I get to meet new people, learn more about them, it's always an exciting moment. Right now, we're still kind of in the midst of hopefully on the latter half of the coronavirus quarantine. So a lot of people, they say weird things because they're kind of delusional at this point, but it's going to be a good podcast anyways. No, I'm just teasing. I love this. I love getting to hear people's experiences and where they are and how they became who they are today. So today we are going to be talking to Dacia Arnold. Sorry, I missed her last name there. Dacia Arnold. And she's an author, a mom, superwoman in her eyes, and I'm sure in many other people's eyes. I'm excited for you to get to hear her story of where she came from, what she thought was her passion, and what she ultimately came out believing was her passion, and what she's doing now. I really feel that her story will be relatable to you, and maybe that you once had a passion or you thought something was going to be how your life was going to go, and then it actually didn't go that way, but it turned out better. So I'm excited for her, and we're going to let her take it away.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, it's a crazy world we live in, but I'm really excited to share about my life. My background is I left home really early. My parents split up when I was 15, and I went to go live with relatives. So when it came time for me to be an adult, I went back to what I knew. My dad, growing up, was in the military, and so I decided that I was going to chase my dad's legacy and join the military just to kind of bridge this gap of like a relationship with my father. So I did this. I joined the military. I wanted to be as close to combat as possible, but back when I joined, that didn't exist formally. But they did say, they're like, you scored high enough on this test that you could really just pick whatever you wanted. So I decided to become a medic and jump into the medical field. So I joined the Army after 9/11. So it was like 2004 is when I joined the military. I worked in a combat support hospital. I worked in Baghdad Emergency room. So they made a TV show about my unit, Baghdad ER, as an HBO documentary. And then I came home and decided to stick with it. I signed another contract, went overseas again. And at the end of the day, like my big goal was to, build that relationship with my dad. And it really did. I was able to call my dad and ask him for career advice. I even was able to get stationed in the same place where he retired. So then he lived down the street from me. It was great. Then I had a son. And I thought that I could be one of those combat boot moms. And, I know many women who are, and they're successful and they're great. I was not one of them. As soon as that little boy came into the world, I immediately noticed I didn't own anything. The government owned everything, to include my time, my home, my family, me, every extension of me. And there was no black and white. So I didn't like not having that boundary of family. And now I'm saying this now, but this should have been like my first marker where I was on the wrong path. So I decided not to sign another contract with the military and finished out. my time my son was a year old. My husband, who had also got out of the military, decided to join the railroad. So he drives trains for the railroad here in Colorado. I went to work. I think I was able to be home for maybe about 10 months before I was really clawing the walls, living a life of constantly, like being constantly engaged, to being a stay-at-home mom just really didn't mesh well with me. So I went back to work for a hospital here in Denver. You know, it was starting over. I had to take an entry-level position because instead of going to college, I joined the military, so I didn't have a college degree. So when I got out of the military, my dad also, he published a science fiction book. And I read this science fiction book and I was like, oh yeah, if dad can do it, I can do it. And this will be another way for me and my dad to really bond. And since then, like, he had gotten married and he has a son, and he has his own family now. And me and my siblings are all grown and have our own children. But I was like, yeah, I can do this. I became a mom and he's, a dad to a younger kid, we could bond some more. I'm always chasing my dad's legacy, always. So then I wrote a science fiction novel. I wrote four science fiction novels, and just really kind of blew up in the industry really, really fast, whereas my dad didn't. And come to find out, like, this one thing was supposed to be his thing, like something that nobody else in his family did. And it really just kind of drove a wedge between my father and my father and I. And so I don't share about my literary career or anything like that. So that being said, I had another baby. And still working at the hospital, my daughter got really, really sick. So it's like illnesses that would give a normal kid like a runny nose, put my daughter in the ICU 4 times in a year. So that was scary. So I had to quit my job at the hospital and stay home with her. And this again lasted for about 10 months. And then she was out of the hospital for an extended period of time. And I was like, okay, mama needs to go back to work now. So I went back to work at the hospital. While I was working at the hospital, I was working on my degree. I finished my degree, my bachelor's in English, thinking that I'm going to continue this writing career. I didn't. I actually applied for a few other jobs, to include Department of Public Health here in Colorado. And taking this, so my current position with public health, and this is where I decided that this is where I need to go. I worked in the emergency room my entire career. I've worked in a hospital setting. But the same time that I was leaving the emergency room was the same time this coronavirus really hit. And so I had to make a choice to stay in the emergency room, where I have trained my entire adult life on the medical response of biological hazards, or leave and go to this next kind of higher echelon of strategic planning of healthcare. Which I've never been a part of. But it was more money. And I transitioned from working on the front lines to working on a different kind of front line, but at home with my family, and staying safe. So I did that. It was really hard for me. I have this inherent need to just save everybody from everything. So taking a step back and working from home, I felt like I was not making the most of my life experiences. Then come to find out, I'll get a phone call later on that, well, my division, director the director of my division, has been tasked now to man one of the overflow facilities from one of our convention centers here in Denver. And I have been identified as one of their logistical people who has the key experience to work with the National Guard in this facility, like on the front lines, but in a higher level of engagement. And it's scary. It's scary because I know at some point I'm going to get sick, but at the same time, I have never felt more validated in my life to have gone on this like string of following my dad and trying to fill these shoes to actually have my own shoes to fill. Like, this is exciting for me. It's engaging, and it's something I'm very, very passionate about. So that's where we are today.
Awesome. I love it. So I have lots of questions and things that I just want to point out, because I think this is interesting so I studied neuropsychology. So I currently help people with money and learn how money works, because I think that's most important. And for me, I believe it's directly connected to mental health. When I looked in the research, the more mental health issues and social issues, domestic violence, things like that, were happening in lower socioeconomic households rather than in higher socioeconomic households. It's not that it doesn't happen. Like, people say that, and I'm like, well, it still happens. I know it still happens, but when it happens, they have the money to take care of it the way they need to. If you get depressed and you're broke, you don't get to go to a psychologist. You get to go find drugs or die. Like, it's just a different situation. So to pretend it's the same is false. And it comes down to how well do you understand how money works. So it's not that psychologists aren't needed. It's not that psychiatrists aren't needed. All those people, they have a job to do. It's just not where I want it to be, because it didn't give me the lifestyle that I wanted or the income. So I teach people how money works.
Awesome.
And that's okay. But I think it's interesting when we're looking at this, I have 11 siblings. Well, I have 10 siblings. I'm the 7th of 11. And if you could see her face, it's sheer pain. Yes. But it's interesting, the idea of going to basically whatever lengths to build a familial relationship with your dad. And I don't know where your mom is. That's one of my questions. Where's your mom at? And maybe that's a touchy subject, but I'm curious.
It is. So she's in one of those situations that you explained, that the socioeconomical, like she's never had to take care of herself. So my dad, being in the military, was always like the breadwinner. So when they were no longer a thing, it kind of left my mother in limbo as financially, and she just never got out of it. So she turned to, like you mentioned, drugs and not good home relationships.
Yeah. So something fascinating about that, there's a book called Story Selling for Financial Advisors. Very interesting book. It's worth a read. But they spend a whole chapter or 2 chapters in this book specifically talking about why it's absolutely essential for women in the family to get financially educated. It doesn't matter, like, it's older way of thinking. Again, you have to look at like the sociology of how we developed as a country, but the man earned the money and the man determined how the money was going to be spent. That was the case for a long time. And so the women never got to make decisions really, but yet they were actually the people who were making decisions most of the time. They were the ones who were paying the electricity bill. They were the ones who were going to the grocery store and shopping. They were the ones who were using the money, but when it came to decision making, they weren't allowed to make decisions. And so the confidence or the identity of being good with money was never there. It's not that they weren't good with money. They were good with money their whole life. Just somebody else was providing it. The moment they were now responsible for providing and managing, their identity wasn't there. Anyways, it's a very fascinating social construct. That's kind of what I assumed. So I tried to go about that softly. I don't know what the word is. Sensitively, delicately, yeah. but the point is, the desire to have a relationship with your parents was a driving force in where you're going. You're still living, not necessarily somebody else's dream completely, but living a life in a way that you could seek for greater connection. And we all do that. We all, at one level or another, seek or live our lives in a way to get greater connection. In fact, there's I don't know if you've heard of Steve Siebold, but he has a book called The 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class, did mental toughness training for Navy SEALs for a number of years. And one of the things he says is that by the age 8 years old, the addiction to the approval of others is stronger than any other addiction that we know of, right? Mm-hmm. And it's that addiction that is so, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Addiction isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's what are you addicted to? And when you're young, you don't really have the ability to think, okay, I'm going to be addicted to what I want more than what I think somebody else wants. And so it's really easy for us to go down this pathway of fulfilling a role that we think somebody else will accept us better in, right? Mm-hmm. I want to create connection, so I'm going to fulfill this role to hopefully get connection. And I mean, there's systemic problems that we're probably not going to get into today, but I think it's interesting. She was willing to put her life on the line, front lines of military, for connection. The reason I bring this up is because if you're a parent or a sibling or a child, what are the people around you, the people who supposedly love you the most or that you should love the most, quote unquote, what are they potentially willing to do to be recognized by you and to connect? Mm-hmm. What lengths are they willing to do that you might think, why do you keep doing this? It's because they want connection, and maybe the only time you recognize them is when they do something that you don't agree with. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to create adverse results in life because of what we're trying is ultimately to get connection. Mm-hmm. And so I invite you to push pause on this podcast and connect with somebody that you've been thinking about, you've been meaning to connect with, but you haven't connected with because life gets in the way. Well, they still need to be connected to. So especially more than any other time in the world, coronavirus, people need connection. Okay, so please feel free to reach out and connect with somebody, because connection is what drove, and again, it's not necessarily a bad thing that Dacia went there, but drove her into the military front lines. You know, and I heard Gary Vee say this on a podcast yesterday, and I was like, whoa, I'm not the only one who says it verbally. But he's like, look, when a war breaks out, I won't be anywhere on that battlefield. I will be running the other way. I know it's super unmanly to say, but that's me. And I fully am on board with him. Like, I'm the most pacifist. Like, I love you. Oh, you want to stab me? I still love you. Like, I don't know. I don't see myself. My self-concept is not a defender. And my wife is super uneasy about that sometimes. I'm like, look, it is what it is. Not the most manly thing to say on a podcast, but it's true. And so that's crucial. It's interesting when you recognize that you didn't own anything and the government owned anything. Like, what was that initial feeling? Like, if you were to describe that feeling, how you felt in that moment where you essentially, there was nothing of your own, because there's women, I believe, and men who are going through this same feeling, if not because of physical things that they don't own, but their identity. They don't own any part of their identity anymore because they've given it away to their children, to their work, to their house, whatever. And they don't own anything. They don't know who they are. It's a very similar feeling. So describe that feeling for me.
So describe the feeling of not owning anything. It's just really, there's this sense of ambiguity that you just gotta, so every day you're kind of just on autopilot. You're like, there's nothing that's going to immediately change my circumstances. So today I have to do X, Y, Z to get through the day. In the military, it's not like when you get fed up, you just put in your 2 weeks notice and you quit. It's contract. So you're bound to this contract, and the consequences of breaking said contract, the paperwork's extensive, but also the punitive actions are insane. If you get in trouble at your job, if you work like a traditional 9 to 5 job, you'll get like a written warning. You'll get maybe a coaching, a plan of action. In the military, they take half of your pay for a month to 2 months. Like, this is your livelihood. And they just, it is insane the amount of control that, I wouldn't say the government as in an entity, but actual people, tangible people have over your life to make a decision that says, oh, that look on your face is disrespectful, and so we're going to punish you for it. It is insane. It's like, at that, it is insane.
I believe you.
So,
That's why I would never be part of it.
and in my position, I worked with wounded, ill, and injured soldiers as they transitioned unplanned from the military into civilian life due to any kind of medical condition. And a lot of these were mental illnesses. And so I have to make both men and grown women fully accountable for it. Like, I had to make sure they paid their bills and they cleaned their house and they mowed their lawn and took their trash out and were at their appointments on time and were dressed in the right uniform. It was too much for me. And to have these people who didn't care about my job or what I said or what I did require more time of me away from my family. It was just, I've got 12 months of this left, and then at least there is like a light at the end of this tunnel. There is an end in sight. If I had 4 more years left on that contract, I don't know.
You would have been one with mental illness, and they would have been helping you.
But what really drove me through this time was to do the right thing. Like, I would just know, like, the military is very black and white. There's policies. Like, you just do the right thing to keep yourself out of trouble and hold these people to a standard and maintain a standard yourself. And that's really what got me through. The real life's not like the military. Real life, it's not like there are no rules. I think that's when I got out of the military, was the one thing that I realized, is that there's no way people have to treat each other with respect. And it was just kind of a culture shock for me, really.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, kind of moving forward in your story, that you went from this place of like extreme structure, which I have like the ultimate complex of authority in my life, probably due to my childhood as well, in parts. But like, I don't love holding to a daily routine or schedule, even though like every successful person says they live and die by it. I'm like, I don't like having a schedule, because now I'm dictating what I hate it. Right. So for me, I have some issues there, but you went from this extremely structured area of life to one, being a mom. There's no structure there. Even if you wish there was structure, there's no structure with your sleep, with your food, with changing diapers, with your day, napping. There's no structure. You can try and create structure, and more power to you. The happiest people that I know who are parents have zero structure. They just go with the flow every day. But more importantly, the next kind of, I wouldn't even say career path you went to, was writing fiction, which has like, it's the opposite of structure. It's you go from crazy structure where there is no coloring outside the lines to you get to create the lines, what color the lines are in, and like you're creating your entire second universe. It's for me, it's a weird contrast. Like, what was it for you stepping from one to the next?
What's really interesting that you say that. So you would think fiction is just the imaginary, the abstract, and just playing around with stuff that doesn't exist. But actually, the physical craft of writing is very regimented. And so there is a left brain and a right brain approach to writing. And I was able to like marry these things together. So I would schedule time to write. I would have a writing goal for the day. They call it, in the industry, we write by the seat of our pants. We call it pantsing versus planning. And so I just pantsed this entire story. And really what this was my coping mechanism of getting out of the military and no longer being identified within an institution. So like, for example, and this is kind of the premise of my story, crap hits the fan. I'm no longer a part of this institution where I have a role, I have a job, I know my job, I know everyone else's job, and can rely on them for survival, to being a mother with all this knowledge and crap hitting the fan. And I no longer have to just worry about keeping myself alive and other adults alive, but I have these little people that I have to keep alive. And so it was kind of this, would I make it? Would they make it? Would we be okay? And so that was the whole fiction. And I just needed to make sure that I could do it, not write the book, but could be successful at keeping these people alive if crap hit the fan.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think another thing that's interesting about, because I don't know if you've ever played D&D. Do you know what that is? Dungeon?
I know what it is. Yeah.
Okay. You look like blank. I was like, does she know what I'm talking about?
I don't play, so I don't want to pretend like, but I know it.
Okay. So what's interesting about this is I'm somebody who, so although it's creative space, and the actual science fiction aspect of it, there are creative aspects. Writing is super regimented, but she just described what made her, and I don't know why your dad didn't do as good, right? I'm not pretending that, but I do think that there's the people who are most successful at creating card games that I know personally, and creating D&D or these types of, like, everything's in their head and they have to write backstories and for all their characters. The thing that's fascinating is there, as she said, there's a level of creativity, but she has to be able to maintain complete knowledge of every aspect of what that person can and can't do in life, and should and shouldn't do, their impositions towards certain things, and understand these people. So her job actually created a circumstance that made that more able to happen, and give her more feedback to create a great science fiction novel or book or story, because she could compartmentalize all those different characters. So it's interesting how it's creative, but it's also a structured event, like you said. It's fascinating. Writing is something difficult for me, personally, to express myself. So that's all good to hear. But I'm curious, the other thing, because now we're moving into, I want to hit on this before we get too far into this, but I want to hit on it with just because it's the time and I have you here and you work in it, and I just see the news. So all I can see is the news, and who knows if it's accurate. I mean, there's plenty of people out there who say both sides. So I don't know, like, nobody knows what the truth is. Personally, and you can hex me or whatever, personally, I choose to live a life that whatever. Like, if I get sick, I get sick. If not, whatever. Like, I can't control too much about my life. So I'm just going to be happy and do my thing. But, like, from your experience being on the front lines now of the coronavirus, from the ER, moving out of that, and then into now planning scale, like, what's been your experience of the coronavirus in these circumstances, and scale of bad, we'll say?
Yeah. So everything that I'm going to say is public knowledge. There's no kind of behind the scenes or anything like that. And I'm speaking for myself and not as a representative of my organization. So a lot of people have your stance. Like, if I get sick, I get sick, just like if I get the flu, I'm just kind of going about my life. Right. Well, the thing is, and I'm going to use you as just a generic you, not you. It's not about you. It's not, I'm going to get sick and that's okay. It's my responsibility to ensure that I'm not going to be the reason somebody doesn't have their grandmother anymore. Does that make sense? So I could have had it already. I could have not had it yet. I don't know. Testing's not widely available yet. But if you are one of those magical unicorn people who do contract the virus and do not have any symptoms, or have like such minor symptoms you don't even notice it, whether it's allergies or if it's the virus, you could go out and continue about your life, and maybe somebody's grandmother is going to the grocery store because she didn't have anyone to go to the grocery store, and then there's an exchange.
Sure.
And it smacks that granny really hard.
So here's my debate. I love debating, and by the way, I have no idea about if what I say is true half the time. Okay. But this is my thought process, right? Mm-hmm. Every level of our life, from government, right? Because government is one who's setting these standards. We have what's called an acceptable loss, right? Mm-hmm. We have certain speed limits based on acceptable loss. We have certain car testing standards based on acceptable loss. We have all of these things based on acceptable loss. And so I get it that I could be the reason that somebody doesn't have a grandma. I could also be the reason somebody doesn't have a grandma because I ran a red light, or I was texting and driving, or just nothing happened and somebody sat on their brakes, a deer ran in front of us, right? There's so, like, living in that type of, from my perspective, any life is too much is not practical. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's more of like, what's an acceptable loss? And do I really believe that not everybody's going to get it eventually anyways? I think if it's like the flu, look, it's like, at what point is Sweden, what they're doing, just saying, hey, you guys social distance, everybody else live their life as safely, but we're all going to get it, mass herd immunity. Yes, there's going to be loss. I'm not arguing whether there's loss. Mm-hmm. For me, it just seems that, like, there's got to be whatever that number is, that we say, whatever it is, what it is it worth, I'm from a financial perspective, is it worth causing mass depression, mass suicide, greater levels of domestic violence? Is it worth causing, what's the acceptable loss? Right now, we're trying to save a few people from a disease, which I'm not saying is bad, but we haven't even hit the ramifications of homes going under, people living in streets, like that. We have no idea the ramifications, just like we have no idea the ramifications of what happens if we don't social distance and go about our lives. So it's like, it's a scale distance for me. So I'm just curious what your perspective is.
Okay. So the immediate loss of, yes, everyone's going to get it, and those people are going to die, are eventually going to die, is what you're saying. And I get it. I really do. It's the thing of our hospital systems being overwhelmed, people dying that didn't need to die, people having resources to save their lives versus those resources not being available for everyone that needs them. And that is a major piece of the social distancing. The thing about flattening the curve, like, instead of having a big spike, so the big spikes everyone all at once, and the flattening the curve is not a flat curve. That makes no sense. Like, so it's just kind of, it's going to be a long haul thing. It has to be a long haul thing for the survivability of people who have a chance. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if I'm 35 years old, I'm fairly healthy, but this thing, I'm going to need a vent, and there are no vents available. But if I had a vent available, I would come out the other end okay. But I couldn't get a vent, so I'm just not going to make it.
Sure.
So I'm not 85 years old. I'm 35, and
the chances in our age group is a lot less than.
Oh yeah.
So there's that where it's like, anyways.
I agree, but there's still people our age that do need the ventilator.
Yeah, there are. I just don't know what I guess my position, and you've seen this from battlefields to now. I mean, Denver's not a small city. It's not a giant city by any stretch of the imagination. Like, compared to New York, it's not. I mean, it's like Salt Lake compared to Denver. It's not really the same. But I think that for me, I guess we don't have enough more information to really know. But like, what's the acceptable loss meter going to be set at of this long term?
Mhm.
and how bad is it really long term? And so that's the one side of it. The other side of it, and this isn't super popular opinion, don't listen if you don't appreciate this, but there's also a reality that although standard no mortality rates have been getting longer, as in people have been living longer, quality of life in your later years is declining. It's not increasing. So yes, just because we can sustain life, there's an argument to be made to sustain life. But if we're sustaining life with a very low quality of life, is it worth sustaining life? I know
Is that your choice to make?
Well, is it your so if whose choice to make is it? This is a question. 100 years ago, the choice to make was you died because you got a disease. So now whose choice is it to keep people alive even if they don't want to be alive? And that's still not legally allowed in our country to say, for somebody to say, I don't want to be alive anymore. Sorry, we can't euthanize you. So if we're going the full extent of medical abilities, then that's what it is. I don't really have a foot in either camp. It's just all the things that go through my head. I'm like, okay, whose choice is these? Whose choices are these to make? Because whose choice is it to make it so people can't provide for their family or have to live on the street because they can't pay rent? I mean, there's so many financial and fiscally important questions that are answered in the name of what's the financial cost, right? So $4 million or something is what it costs for everybody to die. Not for I think it's 4 million last I looked. But in a car accident, if you die in a car accident, the acceptable loss is like $4 million worth of per individual who dies in a car accident, which is crazy. But that's the number that the government chose, and so all their standards are if adding a new seatbelt to a car is going to cost everybody, if it's going to cost more than $4,000 per individual we're going to save, we're not going to require it. If it's less than 4, then we're going to require it, right? And so there's that. There's those standards, and most people don't know about these standards, but they're there. You can go Google them. These standards are in every area of life. So what is that standard here, and what's the fiscal cost that we're willing to endure to save however many lives we're going to save?
Okay. So your stance is we need to open up the economy regardless of loss of life due to the virus.
Not necessarily. I just don't know. I don't know what the stance is. I don't really have a stance. I'm lucky enough to continue to work. Like I say, I don't have a stance. I just am curious, like what other people's opinions are. You're somebody who actually is qualified to have an opinion. I have a lot of friends who we all think this is all stupid because nobody we know has it. But that's not true. I know 4 or 5 people who actually have had it. But the point is, compared to how many people I know who have had it.
Here's a good example.
There's not very many people. Okay.
So you're in Salt Lake. We'll use Salt Lake City. So super earthquake. You guys are due. You're due for a giant earthquake.
I know. I had one 5.7 or something.
Yeah. You've had a few. You have one every day.
Yeah. It could happen. It's true.
So there is actually FEMA, the state of Colorado, the state of Utah, not Wyoming so much. So there are many entities involved in the planning for the super earthquake in Salt Lake City. For people out of context, 80% of the population of Utah is in Salt Lake City in the valley. So when this earthquake hits, it's gonna devastate everything. And I don't even know the projected magnitude of the big one. But this is a real scenario that other states are planning for. So we have a plan to take all of the patients that are currently in Salt Lake City into our hospitals in Colorado. And I think even Arizona is planning on taking some. So we have this plan in place. FEMA, everybody, the government, everyone has a plan in place for when this happens, if it happens, but they say when it happens. So we know who's in charge. We know who's in charge of routing all these patients, who's in charge of taking ambulatory patients out of the city and transferring them on vehicles into the state. We have all this planned out. I say we, but the state, the
Sure.
government has.
Sure.
Okay, say this happens during the virus.
Okay.
Do we just leave you all there? No, we don't leave you all there. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
We
I
do
would
what
hope
we
not,
can
but
to save lives, and
yeah.
and when it's you, it's like, okay, let us in.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think that's why I say, like, I think there's a good argument to be had everywhere. I think that the people in power, I hope the people in power are having the discussion, and there's going to have to be lines drawn, and nobody's going to be satisfied with the lines that are drawn,
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to mean there's going to be sucky parts of the economy, which is going to hurt some people. It's going to mean that there's going to be like people die. People are going to die. People already.
Well, the thing is, like,
no way around.
everyone has a right to access to care. Like, that is a human way. Everyone has the right to access to care. Like, if you walk into an emergency room, they cannot turn you away, regardless of your ability to pay. That's access to care. So if you're having an emergency, you can be seen in an emergency room. But the thing is, people are dying in the emergency rooms, in the waiting rooms. Like, they're dying waiting because there's no room. There's not another one person, one emergency that we can take on. People are dying in the waiting rooms. There's some people that aren't even going to the hospital. They're just dying at home.
I've heard that too, which is crazy.
It's insane. So, like, it's really, I feel personally that it's important just to kind of to maintain these social distancing. A lot of states are opening up and being a little more liberal with these restrictions. I know the state of Colorado is going to a safer at home scale. So groups of smaller than 10, people are transitioning back to work in some sort of staggered, situation. And it's really important for, the services that, like, these small entrepreneur businesses that are service based versus like product based, have the ability to go back to work and, again, contribute to their communities. So yeah. I don't know.
Me neither. I just am glad there's people like you who have the strategic ability and have been seen on a lot of different places, who are advising and taking care of things, because I don't really know anything about it other than what I see on the news, and there's too many different opinions to, like, I feel like, really make an adequate adjustment of what's going on from media sources. But that could be pre-existing biases, so I'll accept that. How I was raised. Cool. So I'm curious, because we talked about your relationship with your dad now, because you took over his. We're kind of transitioning out of a very weird spot.
That's okay. That's fine.
It is what it is. So you became an author. You blew up. Dad didn't. I know it's driven a wedge as far as that part of your relationship. Do you still have other good parts of your relationship, or did it kind of A-bomb the whole type of relationship?
It actually, so noticing that it drove this wedge made me take a step back and notice where the need to build the bridge actually came from. So it's not that this drove a wedge that never existed before. It was just that what I had been working so hard for never really existed. And then seeing this, and then just kind of experiencing that allowed me to see my dad through a different lens of maybe he just doesn't want us to be there. So, like, my sister, my brother, my whole siblings, who are grown, they don't stay in as much contact as I do with my dad, our dad, and it's just, I don't know, it's but now I'm noticing it in other aspects of our relationship where, like, say we live about an hour and a half apart now, but if he comes to, like, if he came up to Denver, like, he wouldn't tell me, like, I whereas if I go down there where he's at, hey Dad, can we stop by? and visit. But I'm pretty sure like they come up here at least once a month outside of coronavirus. But if they come up once a month, then just don't even tell us they're in town. Like
Sure.
wasn't on their agenda.
Yeah. So that's a fascinating thing, because what it does is it actually, my opinion, right? Because I've had many of these experiences with my family, different members of my family in life. What seems like a really tragic thing that has, kind of exposed the wedge. There's two ways to look at it. You could say, okay, well, that's sucky. Or you could say, wow, what about me needed this relationship? And for me, I think that's more powerful. It's a more powerful question. And oftentimes by healing yourself and allowing and not needing a relationship, that can also make a relationship stronger, because now there's not this need for it to happen.
Yeah.
Just if it happens naturally, it happens. If it doesn't, we still love each other. We just live distant lives. That can be more healing for the relationship, but absolutely more healing for yourself, because now you're basing your decisions based on, okay, well, what need was I trying to fill? What crack was I trying to fill with that relationship, when really I just need to figure out inside myself, because it goes back to the same conversation, seeking the approval of others rather than identifying how can I connect with myself? Well, I need to connect with somebody else. No, you need to connect with yourself first. Once you've connected internally, then go and seek connection outside. But connection outside before you connect with yourself is, in my opinion, starting off with a fractured foundation. It's starting off on the wrong foot.
And it's also having to change your lens, like I said. And there's always two ways you could look at it. There's a positive and a negative. So the negative thing was, well, I wasted my entire life on trying to build something that wouldn't have even worked if I was successful. So then I look back, did I waste my entire life? Did I risk my life? Like I guess I never really thought of it like that, having been there. But like, yeah, who goes to this crazy extreme just to fail? And was it about my dad, or was it about me? And then if it was about me, where did that catapult me to? Did I quit? Did I give up? Did I choose to be angry and hold that grudge against my father? And the answer is no. Like, you have to make the choice to see this in a positive light, to look forward instead of behind you, to, like you said, heal, because that's very disappointing.
Oh, yeah, it is, for sure.
It is extremely disappointing to realize that the amount of energy that you put into somebody else is not reciprocated. It hurts, especially when it's someone you respect and love and want their validation. And you have to bring it back. You have to understand that that their life isn't about you, but your life is about you.
Yep.
And your life shouldn't be about them.
I agree.
It should be about you.
I think that same thing, and these are things that I don't know where or how I learned these before I got married, but there are things that made my wife very uncomfortable when we were dating. Because again, for me, I'm walking into any relationship, not just a relationship with my parents or my siblings or my boss or anybody, but because I knew who my relationship with myself was. Then when we were dating, I told my wife that, like, I don't need you to love me. It's convenient, and I like it when you love me. I like it when you want to be in my life. But if you choose to exit my life, like, I'm going to recover and I'm going to move on, and no girl.
My husband said that to me too while we were dating.
Yeah. Nobody wants to hear that, because they're like, what? Yeah. I'm not going to be your only. I'm like, no, I'm not so codependent on you. Like, and I hope that you're not that codependent on me either. Right. So that was uncomfortable. And then it was also uncomfortable when I told her the same thing about my kids. It's like, look, I love my kids and I have like a responsibility-ish to making sure they survive. But if it comes down to my relationship with you or my kids are kind of screwed. Like it goes me, myself, my relationship with myself, relationship with God, relationship with my spouse, then relationship with my kids, then relationship with my brothers and sisters and my mom and dad. And like, I love all of them. I'm not like, I don't wish ill or hope that our relationship falls apart. But like, if it comes down to it, if you don't want to be in my life, see ya. Like, I'm not going to force my way into somebody's life.
It's really interesting. So like, and it really, that it speaks a lot to your commitment to your wife also, because I mean, there was a time in my life where I was like, my kids are everything. If my husband decides to like beat feet, then fine. But then, and I would have these conversations with other people about this, you know, God first, and then your spouse, and then your kids. And it's like, but that doesn't make any sense. But it does, because you have to choose to love your wife. Your kids are just always going to be your kids. Your wife might not always be your wife. Like, she has that choice. Like, your kids don't have a choice to not be your kids anymore. Yeah. And they're going to leave you. They're going to. They should get up and go at some point in time. Your spouse, however, hopefully not. You know?
You hope. Fingers crossed. No, I agree though. So it made them uncomfortable initially, but I would find the people who are most uncomfortable with it have lived a life of codependency. They've lived a life needing that approval from others. And so then when they come in contact with somebody who doesn't need that, they're like, oh wait, where do I fit? You don't need my validation. I mean, not really. I love it. Like, I'm not saying I don't enjoy it. Like, you want to tell me I look good, I will take that all day long. But if you don't tell me I look good, I'm going to tell myself I look good, and I'm still going to have a great self-image of myself, regardless of whether you think I look good or not. So I think that's a huge factor to draw out, is that when that all went down, it gave her the opportunity to take a deeper look at herself and some internal introspection. And we can all benefit from that, especially now. Like, you aren't able, I speak with a lot of public speakers, but I'm a public speaker. I get on stage and there's performers who, like, oh my gosh, they're going through withdrawals because they haven't performed. It's like, what do you need from performing? Right? What is it that you need that's driving that, and why?
So I used to karaoke DJ outside of Nashville in my 20s. I have really, really bad performance anxiety. I will shake. I'll get nervous. My stomach will get sick every single time. Even if I'm speaking, same thing. I will get really, really nervous. So, and you've heard of fight or flight. So for me, my stress response is to hyper perform. So like, if I'm scared or nervous or I don't understand something, I'm just going to overdo it every single time. I'm going to completely overdo it. And I want to like, maybe that is why, like, I've moved so far in my life, is because, you know, that was my coping mechanism. But a lot of people aren't like that. A lot of people freeze up and don't do anything, and don't move, and don't make decisions. So I think I don't even know how to address that.
It's huge. I mean, it's huge. The ability to make decisions, even if they're wrong ones. And in my life, I don't really live an existence of right and wrong or good or bad. I just live an existence of what serves me and what doesn't. And so it's hard to say the wrong decision, but like, even if you make a decision that proves not to have served you, for instance, she chose to go into the military. She chose to do all these things to build a better relationship with her dad. And in the end, all of that didn't really help her build the best. Obviously, she probably has a better relationship with her dad had she not done any of that, which is good, you know. But all these decisions, ultimately, her biggest decision to become an author like her dad was 100% counterproductive, right? Does that mean it was a bad decision? I mean, it didn't serve her end intention, but it wasn't a bad choice. It wasn't a bad outcome. It just didn't serve her goal. And so being able to objectively look at stuff from a position of, does it serve me or not? And even when you think, oh, that didn't serve that objective, okay, well, what else did it serve? How else did it benefit me? And living in a constant state of gratitude for what is, it for me has been the most peaceful existence that I can have, is just being okay with and positive about how life is, because life just is. There's nothing else. It just is what it is. So I'm curious here. How could we support you if we wanted to learn more about your books and even follow you on your mission of working in your new career, which I'm sure that's exciting. I don't know how much of that you're able even to share, but I think it's exciting that you're in that position and you're flying by the seat of your pants. You're pantsing through this life, just trying to figure it out, and you got you got selected. That's awesome. But how could we connect with you if we wanted to read your books? How would we get access to those?
Yeah, so you can find me across pretty much every social media platform. Dacia M, as in Marie, Dacia M Arnold. That's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. That's also my website, daciamarnold.com. I do occasionally blog my COVID-19 journal. I think I did 3, and then I got busy at work. So I might bring that back to life. But yeah, you can follow me anywhere. My books are available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Just search my name and you'll be able to find them.
That's so cool. I love it. So here's the second to last section. It's called Legacy on Rapid Fire. Okay, so I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You can give me 1 word to 1 answer answers to them. And so you ready for this?
Yes.
Okay. There's no bullets, no actual rapid fire, just like comment. Okay? You can relax. What do you believe is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy?
A crystal ball.
Crystal ball. As in you have no idea, or?
I have no.
Or you like?
Just because I'm so new into where I am right now, and I know that there will always be something in the future that'll pique my interest that I will go after.
Awesome. Love it. And what's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
The hardest thing I've ever done? Being a first grade teacher. And working full time.
And then right now, as in
homeschooling effort.
Yeah.
Probably the hardest thing I've ever done.
I love it. That's awesome. And what's your greatest success at this point in your life?
I would say finishing a book. Writing a book, because it's hard. It's hard. If you haven't done it, if you've tried to do it, it's hard. But finishing 5 books.
I haven't finished 5 books.
Yeah.
I'm still working. I have like 1 book that's it's a book journal, and then I have another journal. But my keystone book that I'm writing, haven't written it yet. It is. Yeah. I just don't know how to like express myself properly yet, so I procrastinated. What would you say is one secret habit, mindset, or behavior that you believe contributes most to your success?
Habits, mindsets. Just being positive in everything, even the crap things. Because, before I applied for this job, I was turned down for a lot of jobs. And just being positive. You have to be positive. If you're positive, you'll actually be successful, and maybe not successful in the thing that you intended, but you'll be successful in something.
Sure. Because no matter what happens, you'll find the silver lining and you'll go with it. I love it.
Exactly.
So here's the final question. And this is kind of the key question of this whole podcast. It's called, what legacy are you building? So we're going to pretend that you've died. You're now living. Well, you got to come back and see 6 generations from now. So this is your great grandchildren. They're sitting around a table and they're discussing your life and your legacy. What do you want them to be saying about Dacia 6 generations from now?
God, that kind of makes me want to cry. I don't, there's so many things that people find remarkable about my life and everything that I've done and I've been through. And I do all these things so that I can tell people that I've done them. Like we talked about that validation. So probably in 6 generations, they'll gather around and they'll pick up my memoir, which will be called Memoirs of a Dacia. And they will be like, I'm related to this lady. And yeah, that's
awesome.
That's what I have to leave behind, is that whole story of chasing somebody, but finding myself instead.
I love it. That's such a powerful phrase. Chasing somebody and finding yourself instead. You should write a book about that. That should be the title of one of your books. No, really, that's a good one. Chasing somebody, finding yourself instead. Love it. Cool. Well, hey, thank you so much. And any last words for the team?
No. Put one foot in front of the other. Just keep on going. Don't stop.
Okay. Sounds good. Hey guys, we'll catch you guys next time on Fuel Your Legacy. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.